welcome to Bloom with Bio. It's me Divya. So today is the third day of our 70-day study plan. So till yesterday we have learned biological classification first part. So today we will be continuing with the second part of biological classification. So we have completed Kingdom Monera and Protista in yesterday's class, and today we will be continuing with Fungi, Plantae and Animalia along with virus, viroids and lichens. So shall we move on to the class? Kingdom Fungi. So what comes to your mind when you hear fungi? Fungi are a group of organisms who come and spoil our food, right? So when we are going to see the characteristics of kingdom fungi, they are exclusively heterotrophic organisms. So most of the fungi are saprophytic. They depend on dead and decaying organisms for their food. So this kingdom contains unique heterotrophic animals. Fungus are cosmopolitan. What do you mean by cosmopolitan? They occur in air, water, soil, on plants, in animals, even in our body you can find fungus, right? So they prefer to grow more in warm and humid places. So the best conditions for them to grow is warm and humid places. So there are few examples of fungi like bread mold that we generally see in our house where we keep bread out for some time. The bread molds will be there. Then orange rods, mushroom, toadstool, etc. So even mushroom comes under the kingdom fungi. Now also you have seen white spots on mustard leaves. These white spots on mustard leaves are also fungus. Not all fungus are harmful. Some fungus have economic importance too. Like some of the funguses are used for making antibiotics. Like the first antibiotic which is produced from penicillium, that is the penicillin. So penicillium is the fungus from which the penicillin antibiotic was produced. So one example is penicillium. Then you have another one called yeast or Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is used in baking industries or industries which produces beverages like beer, wines, etc. So these yeast are also fungus. These fungus cause diseases also in both plants and animals. Like in plants it causes rust of wheat and also it causes buccinia. In animals like athlete's foot, a ringworm disease, these all are the diseases which are caused by the fungus in both plants and animals. Now here are different types of fungus. A few examples of fungus. The first one is bread mold. Second one is penicillium. Then the third one is yeast. Fourth one is buccinia. And the fifth one is mushroom. Yeast is an example of unicellular fungi. So except yeast, all fungi are filamentous. So fungi are generally filamentous in structure except yeast, which is a unicellular fungi. Even though this fungi or the yeast is unicellular, they occurs in colonial form as well as in solitary forms. Their body consists of long, slender, thread-like structures called a hyphae. So this network of hyphae is together called as mycelium. Some hyphae are continuous tube-like structures which is filled with multinucleated cytoplasm. This type of hyphae are called as cenocytic hyphae. So the fungal cell wall is made up of chitin and polysaccharides. Most of the fungi are saprophytic. They absorb nutrients from dead and decaying matter. What does that mean? They feed on dead and decaying matters for their nutrition. Some of these fungi are parasites also. Some of the fungi lives in symbiotic association with algae which are known as lichens and also the roots of higher plants which are called as mycorrhiza. Reproduction in fungi. Sexual reproduction in fungi occurs in three steps. First one is plasmogamy, then karyogamy and meiosis. Plasmogamy is the fusion of protoplasm between two gametes. It can be two motile gametes or it can be two non-motile gametes. Then comes karyogamy, which is the fusion of nucleus. The two nucleus from these gametes will be fusing together, and that process of fusion of nucleus in the gametes is called as karyogamy. Now comes the meiosis. It occurs in zygote and this meiosis results in the production of haploid spores. Based on the morphology of mycelium, mode of spore formation and the fruiting body is produced. These fungi are broadly classified into four classes. The first one is phycomycetes, which is also called as the lower fungi, ascomycetes, which are also called as the sac fungi, basidomycetes, which are also called as the bracket fungi, or they are also called as club fungi. Then comes the deuteromycetes, which are also called as imperfect fungi. Now let us move on to the details of these classes. Phycomycetes. Phycomycetes are obligate parasites on plants. They are having cenocytic and septate hyphae. Cenocytic, that is multinucleated protoplasm, and septate hyphae, their cells are separated by the cell wall. Now they are mostly found in warm and humid conditions like decaying woods or decaying logs or decaying substances. Now moving on to the reproduction in fungi. Fungi is mainly reproduced by fragmentation, or common method of reproduction in fungi is fragmentation. They also reproduce asexually by producing spores like zoospores, which are motile, aplanospores, which are non-motile. In sexual reproduction, spores are formed by the fusion of gametes, and these gametes can be isogamous, anisogamous, and oogamous. What do you mean by isogamous? Isogamous, these gametes can be of same type, like both non-motile large ones or two motile small ones. So they will be same. Anisogamy, you can have like one motile and one not motile fusing. In oogamous, a small motile male gamete will be fusing with a large non-motile female gamete. And these spores are having endogenous development inside a sporangium. Now coming on to the examples of phycomycetes. So we have a small shortcut here. Like if you remember ramp, R-A-M-P, ramp, you can easily remember the examples of phycomycetes. This P is for phycomycetes. Now we have three examples. R is for rhizopus, which is the bread mold. A is for albugo and M is for mucker. So it's very easy for you to remember the examples of phycomycetes. Now moving on to ascomycetes. They are also called as sac fungi. These ascomycetes, which are also called as sac fungi, they can be unicellular as well as multicellular. Unicellular, they can be yeast or Saccharomyces, and in multicellular, example is penicillium. They are coprophiles. What do you mean by coprophiles? Coprophiles are organisms which are dung loving, or which decay the dung or decompose the dung of animals. And they are saprophytic decomposers, or they are parasites. So they depend on or they feed on dead and decaying matter, so they are called saprophytes, or they help in removing the organic substances and breaking down it into inorganic substances and removing it from the earth. So they are decomposers, and they feed or they live on other organisms or depend on other organisms for their survival, so they are parasitic in nature. And their mycelium consists of separate and branched hyphae. Coming on to the reproduction in ascomycetes. Asexual reproduction in ascomycetes occurs by conidia, which are produced exogenously on specialized mycelium called as conidopause. Conidia germinates to produce this mycelium. Sexual reproduction occurs by ascospores, which are produced endogenously in sac-like structures called axi. So these asci are arranged to form ascocarp, which are the fruiting bodies. So you can see the asexual reproduction, the spores are produced exogenously, and in sexual reproduction, spores are produced endogenously. Now moving on to the examples of ascomycetes. The first one is Aspergillus, then Claviceps and Neurospora. This Neurospora is used in biological as well as genetical works. And many members in ascomycetes like morels and buffles are edible. Now moving on to basidomycetes. These basidomycetes are also called as club fungi or bracket fungi. They include mushroom, bracket fungi or puffballs. They grow in soil, on logs and tree stumps, and they can also live in plant bodies as a parasite, example like rust and smuts. So this their mycelium is branched and septate. So they have a septate and a branched mycelium. Asexual spores are not generally found in basidomycetes, and they commonly reproduce by fragmentation. Sex organs are absent. Actually, they don't have sex organs, but plasmogamy occurs by the fusion of two vegetative cells or somatic cells of different strains of gametophytes. So what happens? They do not have a sex organ, but even then plasmogamy occurs by the fusion of two vegetative or somatic cells of different strains or gametophytes. Now the resultant structure which is produced as a result of this plasmogamy is a dikaryotic structure. What do you mean by dikaryotic structure? This dikaryotic structure will have a same cytoplasm and two nucleus will be there. So that is dikaryotic phase, 2 nucleus phase. Clear? Karyogamy and meiosis occurs in basidium producing 4 basidospores and which are produced exogenously. So they are produced exogenously. So these basidias are arranged in fruiting bodies called as basidocarp. Now coming to the examples of basidomycetes. First one is mushroom called as agaricus. Then coming to smut, which is also called as Ustilago. Then coming to rust fungi, which is the Puccinia, which we have seen before. Now moving on to the deuteromycetes. Deuteromycetes are also called as imperfect fungi. Why are they called as imperfect fungi? Because their sexual and vegetative phase is not known. So once we identify the sexual or vegetative phase, they will be moved into ascomycetes or basidomycetes based upon their properties or the spores produced. Now these deuteromycetes reproduce only by asexual spores, that is conidia. So the mycelium is septate and branched. So their mycelium is septate, that is their cells are differentiated by cell wall and it is having a branched septate or mycelium. Okay. Now some are saprophytic or parasitic, but majority of them are decomposers which helps in mineral cycling. Okay, so what is mineral cycling? The nitrogen cycle, phosphorus cycle or sulfur cycle, the cycles which are there helping in the fixation of, like example nitrogen cycle, fixing of atmospheric nitrogen and again fixing and converting it into useful organic compounds, again converting it back into or inorganic nitrogens, right? Examples are Alternaria, Coletotrichum and Trichoderma. Now moving on to kingdom Plantae. So it includes all the plants. So they are eukaryotic, they contain chlorophyll and also their cell wall is made up of cellulose. So eukaryotic chlorophyll containing organisms with a cellulosic cell wall. So these are plants. Some of the plants are partially heterotrophic. Why are they partially heterotrophic? Because they depend on certain insects or organisms for their nitrogen requirements. So these plants are called as insectivorous plants. Example like bladderwort, Venus flytrap, pitcher plant. These all comes as the examples of insectivorous plants. And some of them are parasites also. Some plants are parasites also. Example Cascata, which we have been learning from smaller classes, right? Now these plants includes algae, bryophyte, pteridophyte, gymnosperms and angiosperms, which we'll be learning in detail in the next chapter. Life cycle of plants have two distinct phases. So what are these two distinct phases? First one is diploid sporophytic phase and the other one is haploid gametophytic phase, and this will alternate with each other. The length of haploid and diploid phase, whether they are free living or dependent on others, varies in different groups of plants. This phenomenon is called as alternation of generation. Now moving on to kingdom Animalia. So kingdom Animalia includes organisms which are multicellular, heterotrophic, eukaryotic and organisms whose cells do not have a cell wall. They directly or indirectly depends on plants for their food. So they digest their food inside a body cavity or internal cavity and stores their food reserve as glycogen or fat. Their mode of nutrition is holozoic mode of nutrition. It is a type of heterotrophic mode of nutrition. They have definite growth pattern and grow into adults that have definite shape and size. Higher forms of animals show sensory and neuromotor mechanisms, and most of these animals are capable of locomotion, that is from moving from one place to another. Sexual reproduction is by copulation of male and female and followed by embryological development. Now moving on to virus. They are microscopic infectious agents which cannot produce their own energy. So this virus cannot produce their own energy, right? So they are made up of genetic material and a protein coat, and this protein coat is called as capsid. Okay, so they requires a host for its replication. So once this virus is outside a host organism, it is just like a dust particle. It does not have life. It is just a genetic material which is enclosed in a protein coat. But once it gets inside a host, what will happen? It will get incorporated into the genetic material of that host organism and it will take away the function and it will start replicating. And these viruses can infect plants, animals and bacteria. And the virus which affects bacteria is called as bacteriophage. So it's called as bacteriophage. These viruses cause diseases and several damage to the host organism. Now let us see some examples of viruses. Virola, that is the smallpox virus, and HIV, which is human immunodeficiency virus, which causes the AIDS. Now moving on to viroids. These viroids are infectious single-stranded circular RNA. So this single-stranded circular RNA, which are called as viroids, do not have a protein coat. So they do not have a protein coat. So obviously they will be smaller than that of viruses, right? And these causes certain diseases like potato spindle tuber. Now let us have a comparison between the size of bacteria, virus and viroids. In this, which one is the largest and which is the smallest? Bacteria is the largest. Bacteria is largest and it is larger than virus, and virus is bigger than viroids. So the smallest one is viroid and the biggest is bacteria. So comparing to the size, bacteria, virus and viroids. Viroids are the smallest particles. Okay. These also are non-living, like just like non-living once they are outside a living cell. Now moving on to lichens. Lichens are the symbiotic relationship between algae and fungi. So algae here provides food to the fungi and fungi provides shelter to algae. So these are found on like barks of the trees, rocks, etc. So the lichens which are living on rocks will help in soil formation, and also they are indicators of air pollution like sulfur dioxide pollution. So these lichens cannot live in a polluted region. So they are also called as the biological indicators of air pollution. The algal component is called as the phycobiont and the fungal component is called as the mycobiont. Now let us move on to a few questions from this chapter. The first question is, the cenocytic hyphae is. What is cenocytic hyphae? It's a type of hyphae which contains multinucleated cytoplasm and which will not be septate. So the answer is multinucleated hyphae without septate. So they won't be separated. Cells in cenocytic hyphae will not be separated. They will be like a tube of hyphae which will be filled with the cytoplasm and multinucleated. Clear? Next question. Many fungi are in dash association with photosynthetic organisms to form mycorrhiza or lichens. So I have already told you mycorrhiza or lichens are symbiotic association between fungi and higher plants, that is mycorrhiza, and algae, that is lichens. So this is the symbiotic relationship. Option B is the answer. Third question. Select the correct statement below that correctly applies to the kingdom fungi. First option, some fungi are beneficial interrelationship with plants. Correct, like mycorrhiza. B, certain fungi are natural sources of antibiotics. Yes, obviously, penicillium. Then C, the fungal life cycle typically includes a spore stage. Yes, fungus life cycle has a spore stage. So option D is the answer. Question number 4. Which of the following is correct sequence of 3 steps in sexual reproduction in fungi? So we have already seen the 3 steps in sexual reproduction in fungi, that is first fusion of protoplasm, then fusion of cytoplasm, then meiosis. So plasmogamy, karyogamy and meiosis. So answer is option B. Fifth question. Dikaryophase or dikaryon formation is a specific characteristics of ascomycetes as well as basidiomycetes have this dikaryon phase found in them. So the answer is option D. Question number 6. Cenocytic, multinucleated and branched mycelial habitat is found in. So cenocytic should be cenocytic, it should be multinucleate and it should be branched. So when it comes to the branched, which is the answer? It is basidiomycetes. Case number 7. Members of phycomycetes are found in aquatic habitat, on decaying woods, on moist and damp places, as obligate parasites on plants. So we have already discussed that phycomycetes are found in aquatic habitats, on decaying woods, plants, animals. All the things we have already discussed in the class, right? So that is all of the above is the answer. Phycomycetes are found in all these places. Now coming to the next question. Which of the following spores are produced endogenously? The spores which are produced endogenously. Option A, you have zoospores and conidia. Zoospores are endogenous but conidia is exogenous. So this is not the answer. Then B, conidia and aplanospores. Conidia is not the answer. Now C, aplanospores and zoospores. Yes, aplanospores and zoospores are endogenously produced spores. Aplanospores, zoospores and conidia. Conidia is not a endogenous, it is exogenous spore. So the answer is option C, aplanospores and zoospores. Now moving on to question number 9. Which of the following is not true about ascomycetes? They are saprophytic, decomposers, coprophilous, that is growing on dung, and parasitic. This statement is correct. Includes unicellular yeast and multicellular forms. That is also correct. Mycelium is cenocytic. In ascomycetes, the mycelium is not cenocytic. Aspergillus, claviceps and neurosporas are examples. Yes, these are examples. So option C is the answer. Question number 10. So you have 6 statements here. So you have to identify the fungi which has all these characters. So the first one is mycelium is branched and septate. No asexual spores are generally formed. Vegetative reproduction by fragmentation is common. Sex organs are absent but sexual reproduction takes place by plasmogamy. Karyogamy and meiosis occurs in basidium to form haploid exogenous 4 basidospores. Basidia are arranged in basidocarp. So from all these you can identify the fungi, that is basidomycetes, and these basidomycetes are also called as club fungi. So I think you got the answer. Question number 11. Which of the following is correct about class Deuteromycetes? Some members are saprophytic or parasitic. A large number of members are decomposers of litter and helps in nutrient cycling. Alternaria, Colectotrichum and Trichoderma are Deuteromycetes. So all the 3 statements are correct. So option D is the answer. Question number 12. Identify the diagram. So 1, 2 and 3 are given. The first one is mushroom, that is Agaricus. The second one is Aspergillus and the third one is Macar. So the answer is option C. Question number 13. Kingdom Animalia are characterized by heterotrophic eukaryotic multicellular organisms that lack cell wall. Yes, that statement is correct. Holozoic digest food in an internal cavity and store food as complex carbohydrates and fat. Yes, complex carbohydrate, which is the glycogen. Now, higher forms show elaborate sensory mechanisms. Yes, higher forms show sensory elaborate mechanisms. So option D, all of the above is the answer. Now, question number 14. Lichens are. So, who are lichens? Lichens are symbiotic association between algae and fungi. So, that is the symbiotic associationship. So, the option B is the answer. Question number 15. In RH Whittaker system, viroids, sporins and lichens are grouped into. So, where do you think this viroids, sporins, lichens, viruses, etc. are grouped inside the RH Whittaker classification? Is it under Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae or Animalia? These organisms do not have a place in RH Whittaker classification. So, none of the above is the answer. So, with that we came to the end of this chapter. So, I think you all understood the chapter well. If you have any doubts, you can ask me in the comment section or you can send me personal messages. So, I'll clear it for you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and enable the bell button so that you won't miss any future classes. Thank you.